More evidence this morning that story that Florida Senator Marco Rubio has long told about his family coming to America is contradicted by facts. Documents uncovered by the St. Petersburg Times shows that Rubio's parents applied to come to America using immigrant visas to stay in the U.S. permanently. Rubio has long insisted they plan to return to Cuba. Peter Walston has an update on the implications for Marco Rubio's political career in this morning's Washington Post. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, in your piece today, you quote the senator at a GOP campaign event, and we're going to put it up on the screen. My mother, nothing against immigrants, but my parents are exiles. I mean, that comment would suggest that Marco Rubio understands the difference between exile and immigrant, but the evidence is pretty clear at this point. His parents were not exiles, does it not?
It would seem that way. I mean, they came in 1956, as we learned in the Washington Post last week. Now the St. Pete Times had this great story showing that despite Senator Rubio's argument that they always intended to return, his parents actually had had told the government, the U.S. government, that they wanted to stay permanently. So the question, I guess, is can he call himself the son of exiles when his parents arrived here in a very conventional, with a very conventional, for a conventional reason, as millions of immigrants have done for decades since, which is for a job, for economic reasons.
Yeah, and he defended himself by saying that his family planned to move back to Cuba, writing just last week, and this is a quote, "My mother took my older siblings to Cuba with the intention of moving back. My father was wrapping up family members in Miami, matters in Miami, and was set to join them. But in 2009, he said that trip was to take care of a sick grandfather." Take a listen.
Back with my sister and my brother to take care of her father in 1960, and my dad stayed behind working.
How does he explain what seemed to be just point after point after point contradicting him?
I think he would say, and I'm not here to speak for him, but I think he would say that those two stories are not necessarily mutually exclusive. That is, maybe they returned because the grandfather was sick and also intended to stay. Now, the problem is he said one thing and then said another thing, and it sounds different, and it's not just a matter of, as he put it on the first day that he was dealing with this, of some mistaken dates. I mean, that's what he said at first. So this seems like that he's had ample opportunity now to answer what the true story is, and yet it's continuing to sound contradictory, and that's just a problem for him. At a minimum, it's a problem politically and it's sloppiness, but the question is that we just don't know. Is it something more? Is this a case of a politician wanting to embellish his story? Because frankly, being in exile is a lot sexier than the typical immigrant story if you're running for office in Miami, which is a huge and powerful exile community.
And to his future, it speaks to whether or not he might be somebody who would be recruited on the Republican ticket, because he certainly has been talked about. He is from Florida. You have the huge Latino vote. Is there any clear indication about how this is impacting his popularity in the Latino community in Florida, and more broadly, what it might mean for his vice presidential prospects?
Well, I spent a couple of days talking to a lot of Latino Republicans and others who are experts on the politics of the Hispanic community, which, by the way, is of extreme interest to both parties right now, because if you look at the Electoral College map, that is the fastest growing block of voters. They're in play from election to election, and they will decide these very important states, not just Florida, but Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, that really will decide the election in many ways for President Obama and whoever's running against him. So the Republican Party sees opportunities to make gains with Hispanic voters. They see Marco Rubio possibly as the best hope to do that. If they could just put him on the ticket, he would be a charismatic Latino face who can speak Spanish. The problem is he is drawing a distinction now between the exile story and the immigrant story. And all of those voters out in those western states, the vast majority of them, they're not Cubans. They're Mexican Americans. They're from other places. And their relatives, their friends are more traditional immigrants. If they feel like this Cuban American son of exiles, as he says, somehow is elevating that story above the conventional immigrant story, that creates a lot of tension there. And keep in mind also that there's an existing tension because Cubans have a special immigration status. If they make it to this country, it's an almost instant legal status that they get. No other group gets that, and that's why being in exile is so important. important because you're fleeing a political situation as opposed to just seeking a better life for you and your family. But it now seems that Senator Rubio's parents were actually just seeking a better life for their family.
It's a fascinating story. People can see it in the Washington Post. Washington Post, Peter Walston, thank you.